In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening and welcome to all our viewers, and we just are so excited to have Ashley with us. You just heard her in the video. Ashley produced that video for Older Women Likewise from a long time ago. You had made it for us.
Before it started, yeah.
We have really enjoyed having that. It's so well made, and I thank you for the work involved in that so much.
Ashley, do you remember the morning that I called out to you and I was like, you've got to rescue me? There was sort of a preliminary idea and I was like, please no. And so I sent it to Ashley. She's like, oh, okay. I don't know if you spent 3 hours or 2 hours, but.
Yeah, I just came up with what would pull me in.
Yeah.
And everywhere I've been, every place I've worked, they've had my voice do the recording on the telephone. So I did my hello, welcome.
Oh, you did
wonderful. And that was it.
You did wonderfully. And viewers, in case you hadn't caught the similarities in their voices, Ashley is Cindy's daughter. And so we all were on the trip to Israel. So it was wonderful. I was so excited to know that they were going to be on the trip as well. And that's when all of this, our series of lessons on our trip to Israel, sort of the idea was born. And it's been marvelous. And we had such a nice time on the trip. So it's just such a joy to share with you our first touring day of the trip to Israel. We were naming this program and we decided to call it Living Stones Visit the Temple Mount. I have to tell you this story because I've laughed about it all day. So I said, we were texting this morning in our messenger in our group. And I said, what about
4 a.m. 4 a.m. my time?
Well, it was a decent hour for us. For her, it was 4 a.m. And I said, it would be fun. Let's put it Lively Stones. Because I said, you and your mom are lively and we're having such a good time. And they did. It was just made my heart happy. And I said, we could call it Lively Stones. And so Cindy, and it was 4 a.m. now where she was. So she goes, I think it'd be better if we used a biblical reference in the title.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking Lively Stones, 1 Peter 2:5. Is that what you're thinking of? And Ashley saved us by saying she's talking about the King James Version. Of course, no other version says lively. Everything else says living. But it made me think about communication, what we've been talking about this month. If Cindy and I didn't have Ashley for one, but
we need a mediator.
It didn't care for each other as much. I would have gone, does she think I'm, and I mean, I could have gotten all upset because we were talking about versions of the Bible. And I didn't realize that Cindy was not as familiar with the King James. I mean, I grew up on it and you didn't, did you?
I did not, but I'm very, very thankful for your bowels of mercy. You had such great bowels of mercy on me this morning by switching it back over. So I'm going to talk to you in King James now so that you know what I'm saying, Isla.
I never knew there was anything else until I went to Florida College when I was 17 years old, and they had American Standard. And I just was like, wow, as I told him this morning, mind blown. I didn't know there was anything else. So I always thought it was Lively Stones, like, all right, so. And that's the way these ladies was all right, here we go. So it was.
Yes, we get the giggles. When I'm with my daughter, when she was a teenager, we would have to not face each other during worship because what we have the same sense of humor, and so we would constantly like be cry laughing, and so like can't even make the eye contact. So yes.
Yes. And I did get nervous when I realized when she started typing and it was 4:00 in the morning, I was like, the one rule is don't wake up mom. And
this is not going to go well. I had gotten up to use the restroom, came back, and stumbled into your conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
Too funny, but that's so funny. I just thought everybody knew everything that King James, with all those funny little phrases, that are so old. So, so now I have been taught as well. So, but it was fun. Communication. All right. Well, again, tonight's study is pre-recorded. Ashley has young children, and so I don't know how little they are, but they're young anyway. So
they're all very above average too. I'll just say that very above average.
Very much so. I'm sure that's right. So
yeah, I've got a 10-year-old Samuel, an 8-year-old Josephine, and a 5-year-old Barnabas.
So she has wonderful. So and they're your mama's heart, I know. So
Oh, yeah.
So we are proud to be able to record when Ashley is available. So and that's probably what we'll do from now. We want to talk some about why we decided to go on this particular trip, going to Israel. I told him, I said, well, growing up as my parents were Christians and I became a Christian early on, Israel was just like second place to me. I mean, I just knew everything that happened there and I had a visualization of it, but I knew it probably was not specifically correct, just what the Bible said. And I'd talked to people who had been, and it just made such a difference in not their faith, but their perspective, their perception of the Bible and what happened. And it made that for me as well. So I wanted to go, but it was always a dangerous place, for years. And plus I didn't have any money anyway. So, but finally, since I've had money to go and, it's gotten where it's not particularly dangerous for tourists, I was just delighted when Wallace and I decided that we would go. And so that was my motivation, I guess. I had read the book, The Source, James Michener, that talks about the archaeological digs in the Tells and goes from ancient times up to modern. And it's just a marvelous book. And that really got me wanting to go. So that's my thing about going. How about you?
I've always wanted to go since my dad came back. I think I was 4 years old and he came back with a beard, and that was very odd. That's the only time I've ever seen him with facial hair, and it stuck with me. And my grandma talked about it constantly. She had pictures of the Temple Mount in her office, and we would talk about the gates and everything she learned. And then when she passed away, I asked to receive all of the little rocks and pottery shards and mementos that she got from the Holy Land, Jerusalem, Israel, and as my inheritance from her, because I thought I would never go there. And so the closest I could get would be to live vicariously through her. And I made art with her pieces. And then I saw the email for the tour in my inbox, and I was like, that would be interesting, but like, there's no way. I'm deep in mothering homeschool mode right now. It's not the season for that. And then my mom called me and she goes, do you have a passport? And I said, yeah, I had just gotten it a couple months earlier. And she was like, what do you think about going to Israel on the Luke Chandler tour? And I think I blacked out or hallucinated. I was just like, what are you talking about? But she was like, you're turning 40. And I was like, yeah, I'm 40 years old. I've been in captivity. I'm going to the promised land, man. This is like perfect timing. And
are
now
you equating your childhood to Egyptian bondage, Ashley?
Oh man. I had like the movie I had growing up when I was very little. I had Mary Poppins and I had Jesus. Those are the only VHS movies I had. And so I
confusing.
watched Bible movies. And that's one of the biggest things I realize now coming back is like I'll never be able to watch Bible movies the same way again because the landscape is all wrong. I'm like, that's not that's not right.
Right.
It's not hilly enough there.
That's right.
It's probably Arizona.
Yeah, that's America. That's the wrong foliage.
That's right. How about you, Cindy?
Well, yeah, that trip in 1986, it took me about a year to earn the money for my husband to go with my mother, and they had that in common. They were into archaeology. I didn't get it. I really, to be honest, have never really been very interested in the geography of the Bible. In fact, when I would read the scriptures, I would pay super close attention to like, okay, how am I supposed to change my behavior according to what I've just read? But whenever it was talking geography, I'm like, oh, delete box. It was kind of like recycle bin, like ignore that part, to be honest. That's how I'd always read the Bible. And so I'd not paid much attention to it. But when my mother came back and Mark, every time we got together as a family, the two of them would be off in a corner. She'd be like, okay, remember this, remember that. And I've been thinking lately, and she like processed it the rest of her life. And like Ashley said, I mean, it really changed her in a beautiful way. She's one of the most beautiful spirits either of us have ever encountered, but it tied her to God in a special way that's just hard to put into words. And so as we've been traveling around the country, Luke Chandler came up when I was visiting Philip Martin and his family. And he's like, hey, I just came back from this tour. He's, and he was really raving about it. He's like, do you guys want to come with us on the next one? So we thought about that for about a year, and we just couldn't swing it. It wasn't fitting into our calendar. But then it cycled around the next time, and I saw at that point it was going to be kind of like a fundraiser for Florida College. And it was just all these things coming together. Some of the money was going to be going to help pay for scholarships for the kids at Florida College. The fact that Ashley was turning 40 and I was missing her like crazy, and I just like really wanted to spend some time with her one-on-one, and I just somehow was ready for it, and mostly was just wanting to spend that time communing with God and seeing the places where so much of his heart had been broken, and to see the places of where he had something beautiful in mind that he wanted to create in a relationship with Israel, and all the symbolism of what that means for us in Christianity. So it was that, and then the last, I think, clincher was for me, since I'm writing a book called 100 Churches, I wanted the final entry of that, the 100th entry of 100 churches, to end where the church began. And so that's going to be the last chapter in the book that hopefully I'm going to finish writing in about a month. So that's kind of the backstory to how I ended up going. Mark wasn't interested in going, and so yeah, glad that Ashley was eager.
If anyone wants to sponsor another trip, I'd volunteer as tribute.
Oh, and she's fun. I'll say that. Yeah, take this girl with you. Yeah. She will. Yeah, make it twice as fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we want to jump right into if it'll work, y'all. I'm so bad with this. Okay, we're gonna try to share. Let's see if we can.
So this probably won't make as much sense to those listening on audio through Spotify and that, but we are going to be having a slideshow today. So you may want to end up watching this on Facebook or YouTube, so you can see the slides.
Okay. And this is Ashley took this out of the window of the plane.
I had prayed and hoped for a window seat, and it was given to me by a brother in Christ. One of the most beautiful gifts I've ever gotten was a window seat to fly over Israel.
Love it.
And so I was crying. Already. We hadn't even landed yet, and I was crying. And it struck me. Looking at this picture, you can see the airplane wing and a lot of hills down below and trails through the hills. It made me wonder, how old are these paths that are running through these hills? Am I looking at Genesis here? And then the hills themselves made me remember, I don't know why I was surprised, but in Deuteronomy, God says in chapter 8, "For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water and of fountains." And then if you go up to chapter 11, it's, "But the land you are going over to possess is a land of hills and valleys." And as far as I could see was hills and valleys. And I just cried because I'm like, there it is. I don't know why I'm surprised. I've been reading this my whole life, and it's under my feet.
Amazing. So Ashley, you've done quite a bit of preparation. I was busy nomading and you hit the books. What kinds of books did you read that helped you prepare for what we were about to experience?
So the first book that I'll recommend, obviously, is the Bible, but this translation is the Archaeology Bible. It's English Standard Version. And I did my best to read the whole thing in under a year, and it has a ton of footnotes about the context. When the Bible was written, what it would have seemed like to the cultures in that area, how it compares to Canaanite culture, Babylonian culture, Egyptian culture. And it's absolutely incredible to go through that and to see how God's word, if you were a Canaanite and you were having a conversation with an Israelite, how your questions about religion would be answered by an Israelite, and exactly what God says to every single Canaanite pop culture question of the time. So that was really, I really recommend that. I also read the book that Luke Chandler recommended that he uses for the tour. It's The Holy Land by Jerome Murphy O'Connor. I got nearly through the whole thing of this, and then I started listening to some of Josephus's works. He was a Pharisee that was alive during the destruction of Jerusalem and had a lot of Roman best friends and wrote a lot about the destruction of Jerusalem. But that kind of got nauseating. So I started reading about the early Christians. And then I also read about, this one was interesting. It's called Jerusalem, Rebirth of a City by Martin Gilbert. And it talks about all of the infrastructure that was built in the 1800s. And that really helped me see, when I was walking through the streets, what was new, what looked old, and what was truly old. Because when they rebuilt the city, you want it to have like this cohesive look. And so that was really helpful, because I didn't want to get caught up in the romanticism of where I was and think I was with something super old when I was with something from like the 1800s.
Yeah.
So that's most of what I read. But out of all of those, the only one you really need is the Bible. And I recommend the Archaeology Study Bible if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Good to know. So yes, we also Ashley created outfits for every day.
This was my day one Jerusalem. I am a daughter of Abraham. It's the story of Abraham. Abraham went to the Temple Mount to go, or Mount Moriah is where it's at, to go sacrifice his son Isaac.
Yeah.
So my little star thing, it also, we went to, you'll see later in the slideshow, we went to the city of David that day. And so this was kind of my little David star too.
On to the slideshow then?
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's get back to it.
Again, see if I can still make it work. Here we are. Okay. I like this picture that you had made because of the tells that you can see the cities on the hills, that you can't, in America, it isn't always that way. I mean, just on top of the hills, but when you look, you can see as we're nearing Jerusalem that there aren't cities down below, but there are cities up above. That was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the very in the distance of that picture, in the fog to the right, is the Mediterranean Sea.
Mhm.
And yeah, if you want to, in your Bible on your phone, just look up the word hills and see everything that God has written about the word hills, and look at these pictures. It's really, really cool.
Mm.
Very good. So this is us when we got there. When we gathered
About
up.
50 of us, right?
Yeah, I think there were 48, 50, something like that.
Yeah.
And we gathered up, and well, you can't really see him, I guess, to know. By the time we pointed me out to you, it wouldn't matter. But our guide was there telling us where we were going to go. We got on a bus next to go to this. We flew to Tel Aviv, and then we got on the bus to go to Jerusalem.
And I wondered if they designed this hallway, knowing that all of the tourism that comes here, if it's somewhat inspired by the Forest of Lebanon room that Solomon built, where there was a bunch of cedar trees where he would hang the armor. When I walked in, I was like, oh, if they're kind of pulling ideas of like what people are expecting and coming for,
yeah,
this is genius. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yes. And speaking of guides, I mean, I think all three of us would highly recommend Luke Chandler. What other guide can you go with who's an archaeologist that when you go to the museum in Israel can say, I was there when they pulled that out of the ground, right? And he hired a Jewish tour guide who taught us so much. The whole time we were driving, we were learning all about the history of Israel and the modern history and the ancient history and their battles and their culture, and just, you could ask him a question on the side. Maybe 2 days later, you'd start hearing him talk about the thing you were asking. And then we had a driver who was an Arab.
I think he was Palestinian.
Palestinian, thank you. And so he I think he was instrumental in getting us into the West Bank.
And Samaria. He knew a guy.
Samaria. He knew a guy. So yes, Zach, our Jewish guide, would get off the bus and we'd keep going and crossing that border into Jordan. So yeah, highly recommend a Luke Chandler tour for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So we went to our hotel next, and we were so tired. I hadn't slept any on the plane.
Oh, I was ready to go. I was like, okay, winner.
You look ready to go in that picture, Ashley.
I've been up for 20 hours. I'll be up for another 20. I have arrived.
Yeah, it was great. And the food, I was telling the ladies that every time my son-in-law comes back from a trip overseas, everybody asks him, what kind of food do you eat? What's it like? And our food was wonderful. They were kosher meals. Every meal that we had was, if they had dairy, they had no meat, and vice versa. So,
we ate kosher, didn't we?
Yeah, the whole time. But the olives were wonderful. The vegetables and the fruits were marvelous. So I just had to include a picture of our dinner. But that night, then we all fell into bed. So except Ashley, who was ready to go. So.
I was going to the house of the Lord the next day. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I think our favorite food was the Magna bars.
Oh yeah, Magna bars.
Yes, and so we invented a song in honor of the Magna bar that we'll probably not share. So yes.
So the next morning we got on the bus and we went to the Temple Mount. I wasn't sure if this picture of you walking on stone was from there, but it just spoke to me, so I threw it in there with it. So
yeah, I couldn't believe where I was, and I knew like I need evidence that like I'm actually here. I'm not having a dream, and so that was me walking around the place where the apostles would have been teaching the first century church in the beginning of Acts.
I had not realized or had missed it somewhere in my studies that I knew Herod had rebuilt the temple, but I had not realized that he had raised up a flat area like this. I never had envisioned that.
Yeah.
And this was really an eye-opener for me.
Yeah. Herod did a lot of things that put the Jews in a point of view where they were pretty sure Jesus was going to, or the Messiah was going to go to war for that.
Mm-hmm.
Herod had laid he had made it sweet.
Mm-hmm. Of course, none of that temple remains, but
no, what you're looking at is actually a structure made in the Byzantine period, and it's a mosque. From this, we're looking at it from the eastern side. From the southern side. And that's our group.
Yep, this is our whole group that gathered up together. And we have, that's it. And then this is another one. Again, you can see that flat area.
When you're reading the book of Ezekiel, when he looks out and he sees the presence of God leaving the temple and being carried away by chariots, that's the direction where he was looking.
Mm-hmm.
And Ashley, what was the Psalm of Ascent that you were reading as we approached the Temple Mount? Do you remember?
I think it was 123. Let me pull it up here.
Okay. So while she's looking for that, so we're approaching the Temple Mount, and many of us, we'd been told ahead of time, you will need to make sure your shoulders are covered, right? And so when we arrive, everybody has skirts at least to their knee and their shoulders covered, and the guards at the gate were in a super strict mood. And so as we walked toward this area that is considered a holy place to the Muslims.
Mm-hmm. It's where they believe Muhammad ascended to heaven.
Yes. And so they threw us a bunch of extra polyester clothing to put on that covered all down to our wrists and down to the floor. And so, yes, I was wearing there's my long green skirt with the gold stripe that I was thrown. Isla's in her gray smock. We were sweating bullets.
Oh, yeah.
Ashley had dressed appropriately. They had no problem.
I was from head to toe ready to be covered.
Yes.
It was great. It was great. So, yeah, she did great.
But
I wanted to show that one, but I wanted to go ahead. You've got the passage you were going to read.
Psalm 123. I had read and tried to memorize as many Psalms of Ascent as I could. These were Psalms that would be said by God's people as they were going up to the temple to offer their sacrifices.
So keep in mind that you are not supposed to have any indication that Christianity exists on your person. You are going to be in trouble if you're reading a Bible, if you've got anything with a cross on it. You are on their turf, but you've got to be there on their terms. And so and I look over at Ashley and I see her looking at her phone, and I think I know what's going on. And there's I have a video of me coming up to her going, "What are you reading?" And she's like, so Ashley reads aloud a Psalm of Ascent as she and I are approaching the place where David conquered an army to take this territory, where Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, and where God's in the time of Jesus, part of the temple would be here. All of this history. And here's what Ashley reads.
Yeah, God had told Solomon that his heart would be here forever.
Yeah.
And we know that, we are his living stones, which is why it's titled this way, that we're under a new covenant now. But this was as close as I could physically get on earth to where God himself said his heart was. And Psalm 123 says, "To you I lift up my eyes, O you who are enthroned in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of the servants look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a maidservant to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God till he has mercy upon us. Have mercy upon us, O Lord, have mercy upon us. For we have had more than enough of contempt. Our soul has had more than enough of the scorn of those who are at ease, of the contempt of the proud."
The proud.
Of the proud.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, and God answered your prayer, your Psalm of Ascent, your prayer, Ashley, because he had mercy on you. Do you want me to tell how, or would you like to explain what happened at this point?
I was having probably one of my most David moments ever, where if I had a linen ephod, I was wearing it. And I was also prepared to do the Romans thing. And if the authorities said, hey, you need to stand up straight with your shoulders back and stop having a religious experience, I was prepared to do that.
Yeah.
But until I was told not to, I was all over the Temple Mount. Like, I was falling to my knees every time I felt like falling to my knees. I was thanking God that I could be in the place where women weren't allowed to be back when the temple existed, when Jesus was there, because there was a specific place for women. So the fact that I could be alive and be this close, I ran to the eastern side, which is where the door would have been, which was facing the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus ascended to heaven, because I wanted to see what I could see from there. I wanted to face that direction. I pressed myself into the building to get as close as I could to where the Holy of Holies used to be, where the Ark of the Covenant was. I looked to, I think it's the south, I'll have to double check, but the direction that Ezekiel saw in his vision, the glory of God leaving the temple. And then I was thinking about, it was just like trying to, because you only had 40 minutes to be near where God said his heart was going to be for all time. So I'm like, okay, I'm Abraham. What direction is south? I'm bringing my son all the way here to sacrifice him over all those hills you just saw on the last slide. I'm David. God's appearing to me at a threshing floor right here. I want to build God a house, but he said no. So my son's going to build it. Okay. I'm David bringing the Ark of the Covenant to this place, and I'm sacrificing a cow like every few steps. Like, which direction would that have been? And imagining the pillars of smoke and just trying to just experience all of the things that happened in this place through Jesus preaching, teaching, the apostles preaching and teaching, which direction Solomon's portico was. And then finally, the destruction of the temple, where Josephus writes about people still coming to bring sacrifices while the Roman machines of war were lining up east and throwing rocks over, and people were getting killed, and blood was everywhere in rivers. And just the amount of blood that has been spilled over this place. I couldn't get enough of it.
So speaking of blood, so Ashley is standing in the middle, and let me preface it with this. I have some very close friends who had visited the Bible lands, and their most terrifying moment was when their daughter sat on this pavement you're looking at, and the guards with the machine guns screamed at her and said, get up on your feet. So Luke has got this group that's really the direction of this picture, very near where you see it. Actually, I don't know what the name of that part of the structure is that has the little alcoves, but we're right over there. And the guards can't see Ashley, but she's down. Everything she just told you, all that's happening while she's like on her hands, on her knees, and she's in worship. And Luke is talking to the rest of us. And so I go and stand by her, like, if she's going down, I'm going down with her. And the guards, I look over at the guards while she's down on the ground, and they are looking at their phones. And I'm like, God has been merciful this day. And
God knows who's his, man. God knows.
Yeah, they couldn't see her and not that we had intentionally done this, but we happened to all be standing around her, and they were looking at their phones, and everything worked out. Someone else took a knee, and he was told to stand up immediately. So so I was very, very grateful to not spill any of my own lineage blood in this area.
I was ready. If I could choose a place to go. Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
This is a pretty mighty place to meet Jesus, man.
So we survived that 45 minutes and I felt good about that.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm. The Dome of the Rock that's there is it's really beautiful.
It is over
architecture and so forth, and it was built on top of, isn't it, where the temple had been, Ashley?
Yeah, it's on top of a rock at the top of the mountain. And so they say that that's the place where Abraham would have gone to sacrifice Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
There are some cuts in that rock that are the shape of maybe where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, but that also could be from tourism in the Byzantine era.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on top of the mountain. So it is within the vicinity of where the temple was.
Yeah. A striking building for sure. We also went to Solomon's porch or portico.
Mm-hmm. It's not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's where it was, but
Where
it's not the exact same structure.
Right. Yeah. And every time we were told, and that was a good thing, because I was thinking too much of this is what it was, and they would say this is the location but not the building, and so I would have to adjust my thinking every time. So
that was one reason why I was so glad that we went with Luke Chandler, because he would really present the evidence for and against the accuracy of what tradition was saying, that we were looking at, and what the archaeological evidence, how much there was for that to be accurate or not. So, he is very honest. So we always could make that decision in our own mind, according to if we felt like there was enough evidence to believe that we were actually standing, where certain events took place.
Yeah, I liked that. But it was just so neat to stand where we knew Christians had stood. And that was fabulous as well, there at Solomon's.
Ashley, is that looking towards Gethsemane, I think? Is that correct? Is that looking?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Because that is when you mentioned where the Spirit of the Lord departed.
Maybe it is, because it was early in the morning and the sun is there, which is east. So it's probably east.
East.
Which is the direction that the tabernacle faced and the temple faced was east.
And that's when the Spirit departed. Did it not go like we were over there by the graves and by Gethsemane, that would have been the direction?
That is toward Gethsemane and where Jesus ascended to heaven. So that hill in the background, somewhere in that area is where Jesus ascended to heaven.
So there we are back again. And here we are in our outfits.
And me sitting on the Dome of the Rock on the east side.
Is that allowed? I don't know.
I don't know, but God allowed it. So
God allowed it.
I am grateful for his abundant mercy.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that struck me was the olive trees that are planted all around. And I love this picture that you took, a close-up of an olive tree where you can, I presume, I hope I gauged it right, see the olives.
Yeah, in that garden area just surrounding the Temple Mount was where Peter preached in the beginning of Acts, the gospel. And so we stood in a place that was very likely the exact spot where he preached.
Yeah, absolutely. Another place that as we were walking around and learning about the different places, was where the Antonia Fortress had been, where Paul was arrested. And these steps that it's possible that Paul was there, and that where he spoke from there close to the temple. It's just amazing to feel like and to be in the area where the apostles, where Jesus, the Christians had been. It was just so very moving for me, just for many of us, of course.
Where the church began, where a lot of persecution of first century Christians occurred as well.
Yeah, I think what you're referencing is in Acts 2, Peter's sermon at Pentecost. I think this was the location that they say was probably where that took place.
Yeah, and then also when he was arrested, let me think now, but I gotta find the
Paul was beaten by a mob and addressed the crowd
Yeah.
in the northwest corner of the platform.
Yeah, I think he was saying that this was what this area was, but we just went from around the temple, or the mosque, I should say, on that Temple Mount, and just one place to another place, and I don't think Luke ever stopped talking unless he was asleep. It was
I
amazing
love that.
to me, and if you had a question, he answered it, and it was wonderful. You never felt like you never had to go, well, I wonder what that is. Well, he's too busy to tell me. He would always talk. So anything you wondered about, you could get the information, and the things that he presented to the group as a whole were, just fabulous, the stories and all. And I can't even, I wish I could go around with a tape recorder and but it was just marvelous. One of the men on the tour had gone the year before, and I'm thinking that would be good to come back, because then
It would be great to go, Isla.
And Ashley is accepting scholarships to go back. But from there, we left the Temple Mount and went to the Western Wall. And I've always known it as the Wailing Wall.
Me too.
Yeah, but they have, I guess, felt like they needed a more upbeat.
Yeah, the Jews have a different PR going on now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is Luke pointing toward the Western Wall and showing us on the left-hand side was the men's section, the right-hand side was the women's section.
And that's the last big section of the wall that existed, that was built by Herod when Jesus was there. So that's its significance, is it was the last time the Jews had a temple. Those stones were also in place.
Right.
So is it the stones, the lower level stones, that are the original stones where Jesus would have been? Yeah.
The ones at the lower level where the people are. And you see how Cindy's just chipper, and I'm about to die. Look how hot. I can't take the heat very well. So, there
was heat for sure. Glad we had our hats.
But we're, of course, on the women's side. And as you say, that lower section, it was so interesting how the people worshiped there. And they would rock forward, and some of the men more vigorously than even the women did, but both of them. We asked our guide, his name was Zach, was it just a spontaneous, or was it purposeful? He told us about how the Lord tells you to worship. God said to worship in love me with all your might, with all your soul. And so he said, we feel like this is how we can worship God, with our might, with our body. And so that was, I don't know that it was a prescribed manner. It's just what they learned to do. Again, the men, and this is Cindy, about in the middle, black hat, there at the wall. What was that like for you, Cindy?
Well, one of the other young women that was on our tour had just been right next to it, and she was holding up a cross and smiling and was having her picture taken. I remember one of the Jewish women kind of looking over at her like, it was a little bit tense, but I loved that she did that. And that's a picture in my mind that I'm going to treasure the rest of my life. But yeah, I prayed at the Wailing Wall for quite a while, and the women around me, I believe, are reciting a special prayer and it's a prayer, I believe, they're asking for God to send the Messiah. So I spent, first I had my own personal prayer with God about just praying for his presence in my life and praying for a remnant of my descendants that would honor him and love him, the way that my mother did, and that she passed on to me. And that, I'm hoping that until he comes again, there'll always be a remnant. Certainly there will be with this people that are spiritually my children that I've had a good influence on, but also for just our family. And the rest of the time I prayed that these women beside me, these precious, precious souls, would realize that God has answered their prayer for a Messiah in a way way beyond what they're asking for, above and beyond what they're asking for, that it's not a physical rescue, that he wants to save them eternally. So I was praying for all the souls of those women around me who were seeking God. And I was very curious as we went along a lot of these walls. I had to know what they were writing, because there were these little pieces of paper shoved in between these rocks all over. And so there were several times where I would take one out, read it, and put it right back where I found it, just to know, like, I needed to know what's on all these little prayer requests. And the only thing that I saw over and over again were just people's names. So that was unusual. And just a little side note, but yeah, I'm glad that I did it. I'll never forget what happened, while I was there.
Yeah, we had 15 minutes at the wall. And so I had to figure out what I was going to do with my time there. And I was struck by how many people were there, and yet it was so silent that you could hear the fluttering of birds' wings. And it answered a question that I had had for a while, where I wondered what it was like to be God and to have all these people praying to you all the time. I always imagined it would kind of be like a lot of radios on all at once, like voices, like a wall of sound. And yet it reminded me of all of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations about the Jews and their decisions, and how God says, I'm not hearing you. I'm not listening anymore. And it was like watching all of these people pray, but not, and I felt deaf. Like I couldn't, I said, that's so interesting. And I thought it was also symbolic. Many of them would cover their eyes. They wouldn't see anything but the words that they were told by their people to look at, their Hebrew words, and they would do this. And I thought, I saw so much meaning and intention in that, of I am choosing to look, and I am choosing what I believe, and that was very humbling as well. It was very, very humbling. And if you look in the picture, there's a lot of empty white chairs there. And it made me think of, after this Earth project is done, how many empty chairs where there'll be from people who are so close to the truth all around them, but that were so focused on what they had been told to believe.
There was just, every place, there was so much to think about. I was telling Ashley I would have loved to have had half a day at each place to just think and meditate.
What we should do, Isla?
Yes.
We should go spend half a day at each place, Isla.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Bucket
list. Bucket list. We'll put that on our bucket list. So, well, we're going to stop for tonight because we don't want to try our viewers' patience, but we hope that you will continue to enjoy our programs. We hope to make a new one each month as we go through the trip that we made. And we'll just focus on just what we saw and how we felt about it. I hope that you will gain from it, those who are going, those who have been, those who'll never get to go. That you can see the Bible lessons that we were able to draw, the meditations that we have and still do have, from the trip that we made and from being there in that place. Place is really significant. It's one thing to read about a place, even to see pictures, but to go there yourself is just moving in a different way for us. And I'm just so thankful that, especially that we were able to go together at the same time, and that it's just that we, had a safe trip, that God was good to us in all of that. So I look forward to doing this again next month. And thank you, Ashley, so much for all your work on this and your pictures. And we will continue to work on that. And just stay tuned. And we'll, not sure exactly what day, but we'll be doing the next installment. Next month, we're going to be talking, Cindy and I and a couple of guests are going to be talking about the joy of God's comfort. That will be our focus. Comfort will be our focus for next month. And so we encourage you to join us again next week at 8:00 for Older Women Likewise. So in the meantime, ladies, I will say good night.
Yeah. Good night. Thank you, Isla. Good night.
Good night.